What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to DoloresCannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Rob Sharksley, who is an avid writer of both fiction and non-fiction. Now, Rob has a degree in science and has written a large number of factual articles. Now, over a long period, Rob has explored the alien and UFO question and has made investigative trips to research UFO hotspots, as well as investigating numerous places known for paranormal activity. He joins me today to discuss his research into Hollow Moon theory and more. And Rob Sharksley, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I really am looking forward to this interview with yourself. Fascinating books that you've authored, really fascinating material. Did you ever think that you would go in the direction of the sort of context of the books that you have?
No, I didn't. In fact, I thought I'd be a fiction writer. Sometimes I think I'm writing fiction, but as it turns out, it's supposed to be nonfiction. At least I think it is.
Wow. Okay. So what is this journey like that you've been on, where you are now? Do you find it very fulfilling doing the work that you're doing?
Yes, I do. I also find it frustrating. It's a journey that just sort of evolved. I know it's been an overused phrase, but it's a journey of discovery for me. And it's frustrating because I want answers. No one wants to die without having the answers, and it's hard to find them. I keep coming up with evidence, I keep finding theories or developing theories, but really what I want is the answers. And I'm a bit of a skeptic. I like to kick the tires of things, including those of UFOs, if they have them.
Absolutely. And do you find, have other bigger name speakers in this field come forward to support the work that you're doing as well?
I've had a number of people get highly interested in it, but in my field, everyone seems to have their own theories, and they're not so much about supporting each other as about proving their own theories are correct. I just spoke with a Dr. Rita Louise, and she's marvelous, but her theory is based on mythology. I tend to base mine on what I call harder facts. And so although we've come to many of the same conclusions, we do differ on some aspects of them.
Right, okay. Well, that's good that you're able to talk to some others in the field that must feel that you're not completely isolated in your own theory, that there's truth in what you're doing, basically.
Well, it's a hard thing because, of course, when I first started discussing or thinking about the hollow moon theory, I completely dismissed it. On one radio show, they asked me, they said, well, what do you think of the hollow moon theory? And I said, nah, it has no credence whatsoever. But I started investigating it, and the next thing you know, I don't know that I'm convinced completely, but there seems to be a lot of evidence for the idea of a hollow moon.
Yeah, and we're just about to get into this as well. Because there's other books that you've done as well, just before we go ahead, isn't there? There's not just the hollow moon theory that you've published.
No, my books evolve one from the other. The first book was Darker Side of the Moon. They are watching us, with the idea of aliens on the moon. And then I did Ancient Alien Empire, Megalithia, and then For the Moon is Hollow and Aliens Rule the Sky, and then Deadly UFOs and the Disappeared. And now I'm working on a time travel book.
Time travel, that's fascinating. That is fascinating. Okay. Which I'm sure it all connects. The dots do connect. Do you find that?
Yes, one thing leads to another, and that's why I keep writing these books. I'm trying to find answers, and some of the explanations for the extraterrestrial interventions we've had just don't quite add up, and that's led me to time travel.
What key answer are you looking for, would you say, or what key answer started it all off for you, in a sense?
Well, my brother, after years of not telling me, finally came out and told me that he and a friend had experienced missing time while camping out in the desert in California. He didn't even remember it himself for like 20-something years. And then it just spontaneously came to him that he had seen a bright light in the sky. It had streaked overhead and landed somewhere nearby. He told his friend John, can we go look at it? They said yes. They got up to go. They started walking out to the desert. It was late at night. And then nothing. They don't remember anything until 9:30 the next morning. And they even forgot all about the incident until my brother remembered it years later.
Wow, okay. And he had, no one else in the family knew about this?
No, he didn't even know about it. I mean, it just was a suppressed memory. It came to him one day, and he was showering. And as he scrubbed his arm, a piece of like gray metal or plastic came out of his arm. And that seemed to trigger the memory. It was a small piece, like about half a centimeter in size. And he assumed at first it was from an accident on his motorcycle. He was always falling off his motorcycle. But he realized it wasn't anything he was aware of. It triggered this memory. Then he called his friend John. He lived in Vegas at the time. His friend lived in San Diego. And they became so interested in it that his friend moved his entire family to Vegas to be near my brother to further investigate this.
Wow, okay. And that was the catalyst of questioning, in a sense, what happened to your brother that led you on this amazing path.
Well, I'd always had an interest in science fiction and UFOs, as a matter of fact. And but yes, I think it was the thing that triggered it. It got me interested in the subject, and from there it just sort of grew and grew and grew.
Yeah. Have you ever thought of mixing science fiction in with your work to create other sort of contents as well that would be more accessible to people?
Yes, I also write science fiction. I have a trilogy out with Permuted Press, Simon & Schuster, and it's based on a lot of facts from science, like the Lorimer waves, the fast radio bursts, and things like that. And I try to incorporate that into my science fiction.
Ah, fascinating. Right, so there are two sides of you already here.
Well, when I can't find the real answers, I make them up.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And what this work does is lead you in more to create great works like the science fiction, by delving more into, as you would say, science fact.
Well, science fiction is an exploration as well, and I like to explore ideas in science fiction that there are a few facts for present, but that should be talked about.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely greatly into science fiction myself, so don't worry. Okay, let's go on to Hollow Moon. This is going to be fascinating. Okay, so we understood where this sort of began for you. Where do we start with Hollow Moon? Well, what is your proof that the moon is hollow?
I wish I could say I'd been there and found it so, but no. The proof, I try to gather evidence from a number of sources, like recorded history, mythology, legends, but also I try to find as much hard evidence as I can. And when I started investigating the moon for real, I found out that it's the oddest object in the solar system. It's their closest neighbor, and we know less about the moon than we do know about Mars, it seems, for instance.
Well, that's probably, yeah, well, we're so desperate to get to Mars, it does question you as to why we're not setting up a permanent base on the moon. I know there has been talk about that as a launching platform, but it doesn't seem to be the case that we may be going back as soon as we think to the moon.
As soon as we think. It's been half a century since we were last on the moon, or just about. There's evidence we may have been warned off the moon. And it seems to be credible evidence for me. Is it a smoking gun? No, but there seems to be a lot of evidence that we're not supposed to land on the moon, at least in certain places. And I think NASA is aware of that fact.
Right, okay. What do you think, for those who couldn't go down this path, that the moon is hollow, and we're going to get more into this as well, the theories behind it as well, that some may look at it as though there's nothing to be made money from, basically. There's no raw materials that we could use, that we could bring back to Earth for financial gain, so what's the point in going there?
There's a lot of points for going there, more points than not, obviously, and we did go there. But there is helium-3 on the moon, for instance. It's in abundance. It's very rare on the Earth. Helium-3 makes the ideal fuel for fusion reactors. There is a lot of other elements on the moon as well that we could use. And the average asteroid, for instance, if moved into Earth orbit in mind, would give us about $9 trillion from that one asteroid alone, as far as its economic value goes. That's roughly equivalent to the entire world's gross domestic product for 1 year. So if an asteroid can give us that, what could the moon give us?
Very true, very true. I always remember that film by, I think it was David Bowie's son that did the film Moon, I think it was. I don't know if you saw that film, where they were actually harvesting material from there. They were a clone in the end. That's what the film was about, yeah.
Yes, that wasn't David Bowie, was it?
Was it David Bowie's son?
Oh, was it? I didn't even realize that.
Well, I might be wrong, but I think it was. I think his son produced
No, you would know better than I would.
I think so, yeah. Well, that was a great film, and it made you think. Well, made me think when watching it. Well, why have we not gone back? And as you say, is it possible we were warned off? Because we put so much money into the International Space Station with, I think, some very important scientific research that takes place up there. But surely it would make more sense. It makes sense to go back. Do you think it's the case that we barely just made it to the moon in the attempts that we did go?
Well, yes. I mean, the Apollo 11 and Apollo 13 kind of show that. Apollo 11 almost didn't make it off the moon, but we've had some almost 50 years of technological advances since then. For instance, the computer on board Apollo 11 was roughly equivalent in power to a handheld calculator of today. So we have much better computers we could use. We have much more sophisticated equipment. We've certainly come a long ways in development. We should be able to get to the moon with no problem. We are making it to Mars, for instance.
Yeah, it is very strange, isn't it, that the more this interview just carries on. Okay, so I've presume, I mean, my science background is not fantastic at all. What lessons I did attend at school, but is the moon? I mean, if the moon was not there, we wouldn't have the tidal occurrences that we do right now. There would be other issues as well that planet Earth would suffer from without no moon. Am I right there?
Yes, I watched that documentary too, If There Was No Moon. First of all, there are other tides. The sun causes a tide. The Earth's rotation, centrifugal force, causes a tide. The moon is a stabilizing force around the Earth, but Mars has been doing pretty well without a moon of any consequence for millions and millions, even billions of years. And it's not wobbling all over the place either. Would it cause some problems for the Earth? Yes, over long term, but over the lifespan of life on Earth, for instance, or at least human life, no, nothing at all.
Do you believe that it's placed perfectly where it is?
I think it's placed too perfectly. It has perfect alignments for the winter solstices and the equinoxes. It's perfectly placed for solar eclipses, total ones. No other moon in the entire solar system, and there are hundreds of them, can boast that. No other planet has a moon that has that perfection for solar eclipses. Only we do. The moon is also the largest moon for any terrestrial planet in the solar system. In fact, one noted scientist, a Nobel Prize winner, said that it would be easier if the moon wasn't there than to explain it being there. So.
Yeah. And the evidence there, I'll ask you, is there evidence, would you say, that prior civilizations reported that there was no moon?
Yes, we have a lot of evidence for it. Aristotle referred to a people in Greece that existed before the current Greeks lived there, and he called them proselynes. These are people whose name meant before there was a moon. The Mayans talk of a time when only Venus ruled the heavens and there was no moon. Other cultures talk about the same thing. The Romans referred to a time before there was a moon. Even the Bible has one reference to a time before there was a moon. So there seems to be recorded history of a time before there was a moon.
So could you actually say that the circular orbit of the moon isn't natural in a sense?
It could be natural. There is one object in the solar system I know for sure has a more circular orbit, and that's Venus. But then Velikovsky had his theories about Venus as well. The moon's orbit around the Earth should be more of an ellipse, and none of the 5 main theories of the moon's origin explain the fact that it could be so circular, not one. And every one of those 5 main theories has massive problems. Even the latest, where a planet's supposed to have crashed into Earth and created the moon, the planet Theia, they call it, it has major problems too. For instance, if a planet crashed into Earth, smashed the two almost apart, and all this debris formed the moon, there should be material from both planets making up the moon. There isn't. There's no sign of any material from the planet Theia on the moon at all.
Now, a hollow moon theory, in a sense, is kind of like saying that it's a bit like a tennis ball in a sense. That there's a very thick crust, I suppose, is what we're saying, and how hollow is it inside? Would you theorize?
Well, from my evidence, we know that the density of the moon is too low for its size. So either the moon is like Swiss cheese with a lot of holes in it, caverns, or there's a hollow center. Excuse me. Evidence seems to point that it's a hollow center. We have seismic information from the moon that seems to show that moonquakes, the waves when they travel through the moon, don't go through the center. They go around it as if there was nothing there. The moon rings like a bell when it's struck. When the Apollo vessels took off from the moon rang for a long time. When other things impacted the moon, it rang for hours. It also seems to have what one scientist called built-in shock absorbers, as if it had a dampening capability. The moon doesn't wobble. Earth wobbles. The Earth has an axis that wobbles. And on the moon, it doesn't wobble. There's all sorts of oddities about the moon, translunar phenomena, things that have been sighted on the moon for centuries. NASA did a report on this itself. So we know the material's, valid. But yeah, there's just a lot of oddities about the moon.
So when you mentioned there that the moon rings like a bell, what do you mean by that in a sense?
Well, a bell is hollow. That's why a bell rings. It vibrates. The moon rings. We impacted a satellite on it. The moon rang for hours. When the Apollo 11 and other Apollo missions took off from the moon, the moon vibrated. We have seismographs left behind on the moon, and they recorded vibrations on the lunar surface. And it wasn't me who said it rang like a bell, but a noted scientist for NASA. They said it was almost inconceivable it could do that. They don't know how, unless, as he put it, the moon was hollow.
The moon was hollow. What about the dark side of the moon? Is that the same effects, do you think, with the ringing effect?
Oh, the ringing goes right through the whole moon. By the way, there is no dark side of the moon. It's the far side of the moon. It gets daylight, too. So I just thought I'd correct that, because everyone thinks of Pink Floyd, as I do, in the dark side of the moon. But the moon gets day and night on both sides of it. The far side of the moon is all craters. There's no maria on the far side of the moon. These are large, dark lava fields you can see from Earth with the naked eye. They're like dark gray patches on the moon's surface. They're on our side only. They're not on the far side. And two scientists, Russian scientists, think it's because magma was pumped from the center of the moon onto the surface there. And it was pumped by ETs, basically.
This is incredible. So you've mentioned, I'm sure you've used this word before, and I hope I've got it right, spaceship moon or something like that.
Spaceship moon theory.
Spaceship moon theory, that's right. Where this is a sort of, as you've termed it before, a generational ship. So let's just get into that idea of what may be where this came from, this hollow moon, and what its purpose could be for as well.
Well, it was two Soviet scientists, Vasin and Shcherbakov, that came up with the spaceship moon theory in the 70s. And they did this because none of the origin theories at the time seemed to account for the moon. They still don't. We still have major problems with the newest theories, including the latest one, the fission theory. But the moon could either have been basically terraformed by ETs and moved into orbit around the Earth, or it could have come from somewhere else entirely. I'm not sure which is the case, but that the moon's orbit probably isn't the original one is a pretty good certainty. If the moon were just wandering by and captured by the Earth, it should have had an immensely elliptical orbit. It should have shot one of the two, the Earth or the moon, practically out of the solar system with highly odd orbits. This isn't the case. It's too perfect. The moon couldn't have been captured by the Earth unless the Earth had an early atmosphere that stretched much farther out into space. We have no evidence for this either, because it would have had to have that to break. It didn't have it. So the moon may have come from another solar system entirely. It may have been wandering through deep space for countless millennia or even millions of years.
Crikey! I mean, how big would that make the hollow moon then? That's a huge size. I mean, you're talking like a Death Star kind of size, are you not? From Star Wars.
Yes, and in my latest book, I even refer to it as a Death Star. It doesn't have to have a huge center. And again, it could be caverns, lava tubes creating the hollow effect that they just used. But it looks as if the center might be hollow. With the fact that no seismic waves travel through the center, it makes one think that. Large craters on the moon are very shallow. Small craters are very deep. If there was an inner protective shell of metal, the small craters would be natural for meteorites. They'd hit and create a deeper impact. The bigger impacts would bounce off that metal shell and create a shallow crater, which would be the larger craters. This is the way they are on the moon. Big craters are shallow, small ones are deep. The moon could, I think, my own personal theory, we reach a point where we can start hollowing out asteroids. We're just about at that point now. The money we can make off them is tremendous. Even Carl Sagan said that one asteroid would be a tremendous boon to human and be far easier to use as a space station, for instance, than trying to create one from scratch. So if other races reach this point and they literally decided to launch from their own solar system into the cosmic sea, this would be a great way to go. Also, there's another problem. Not all alien species are probably kind. Just as in nature, some predators are really predators and some not so much. We think that because there's a highly evolved species, they may be kind, gentle, benevolent. Not necessarily the case. They may be highly competitive. If this is the case, races might want to hide inside of asteroids and moons. There's more rogue planets theorized between the stars than around stars. So this is not a ridiculous idea.
So almost hiding from predators. That may be, okay.
And yet sometimes they'd have to come into a sun, just as if you're out in the cold, you would want to move into a campfire and you would want to find resources that you might need. No closed system is perfect. It leaks. Therefore, once in a blue moon, you'd have to restock, refuel.
How far could you get in something like this? I mean, you called it a generational ship. That's because obviously we're not talking a few years of travel with something like this. You're talking a lifetime.
Oh, lifetimes beyond imagination. In fact, such alien species who lived inside these things might become retrograde. They would be cocooned. They'd turn in on themselves eventually with no exterior exploration or capabilities, and they might become basically high-tech decadent cultures. If you put a bunch of people on a human ship in space for thousands of years, they'd become a culture. But what kind of culture would they become?
Yes. Wow. Okay. And again, what better way to protect you from outside elements than going within?
And also to spread your species around. If survival is your goal, you don't want to be on just one planet that might be hit by a cosmic ray burst, an asteroid impact, a sun going nova, or a solar flare. You'd want to spread out to the stars. And what more convenient way to do it than to use an asteroid, hollow it out, stock up on supplies from the Kuiper Belt, from Plutons and the Oort cloud, and then set sail. You could go for a long, long time that way.
But to move something like that is beyond our understanding, beyond our technology.
No, not really. It's already been theorized by scientists. Trust me, I'm not coming up with this stuff. I'm not that smart. If you were to move the Earth further out from the sun's getting brighter with time. In a couple 100 million years, it's going to be about 18% brighter. So they theorized we could actually move the Earth. And you could do it simply by taking one asteroid every 10,000 years and lobbing it into orbit around the Earth. It would tend to add to the gravitational effect of the Earth as it rotates the sun, and the Earth would slowly move over time further away from the sun. This is not fast, what we're talking about, but it works.
Okay, so there is a theory there for that then. What do you think NASA may know? I mean, let's just, where do you think... Do you think they've... What do you think they've discovered? What do you think NASA's discovered?
I think they've discovered there's extraterrestrials. I think it was a shock to them at first. I think they're hiding the fact as best they could. Examples are airbrushed photos from the moon, the fact that high-resolution pictures of the moon that once were posted on the internet have been removed and low or medium resolution are there instead, so you can't zoom in on them. I've tried. There's been a lot of reports from various astronauts, pilots, even flights in orbit around the Earth by shuttle people. Clearly shows that something is going on. I watched one myself. I can't think of her name, but it was a female commander of the shuttle. And at one point, she's talking. She's on camera in the shuttle, clear as a bell, and she says, "There's that alien spaceship again." And immediately, you don't hear her after that. Her mouth is still moving, but you're not hearing a thing. She was switched to a private channel. And then they cut off the video shortly afterwards. So I think something's going on, and I don't think it's necessarily good for us.
What if the theory is that maybe it's a launching station, it's some sort of surveillance post rather than just a generational ship?
I think it's a bunch of things. In my last book, Invader Moon, I talk about when I think it might have arrived based on evidence I've gathered. No, I can't give you an exact date, but it was probably around 12,000 years ago, around 10,000 BCE, when it came, based on evidence that we've accrued geologically from around the world. Flooding, the Great Flood, Crown Fire in North America, the wiping out of the major species at about the same time, the mega beasts in North America, for instance. The collapse of what I think was a worldwide civilization, a megalithic one, big on the stone building thing. And I think that they may be watching us, but I also think they're interacting with us. And there's a lot of historical evidence, even recorded evidence, that they've been interfering in our development.
Yeah. Would you be surprised then within the next 20 years if we did go back to the moon and we had a permanent base there?
I think we might be allowed on certain areas of the moon. I'm not sure because we don't seem to have landed anybody on. It isn't just the United States that hasn't done this. It's every country on the earth. I mean, Russia was all hot to get to the moon during the Cold War. And we stopped going before the end of the Cold War, and they never went. China has capabilities. It put a rover on the moon. It stopped working in very short order. We haven't been back, although the technology is clearly there. Under President Bush, the last one, he said, well, we'll go to the moon again and put a colony there, but it never happened. He just said it, but it never occurred. It's almost as if we're deliberately ignoring the closest neighbor to us. I mean, the moon's a wealth of information. Here's this planet circling us a mere 250,000 miles away. But instead, we want to go to a planet that's 62 to 65 million miles away. Why not go to the nearer one first? We don't.
Yeah. And do you think that's because of what are the potential discoveries to have on Mars compared to on the moon?
No, I don't think so. I think I think all the planets have a lot of information to give us, but surely the cost benefits of going to their nearest neighbor, a mere 250,000 miles away approximately, are far greater than the billions it would cost to go to Mars, for instance. Plus, would give us valuable information and technology development to make our trip to Mars a better and safer and quicker one.
Do you think that Mars has a hollow moon orbiting it as well?
There is that belief. Phobos, for instance, is just like our moon. For its size, its density is too low. It's also an odd shape, and also there seems to be some sort of monolith on Phobos. Plus, Phobos' orbit is extremely odd. And by the way, these do nothing to help balance Mars in its axial tilt. They're far too small. They're about the size of asteroids. But here's another weird thing. They don't appear to be asteroids. Their orbits are such that scientists don't believe they are asteroids. They just couldn't have gotten into orbit that way.
That's interesting, isn't it? That is interesting. When you mentioned the megalithic structures earlier on, or just previously, do you believe that those who created the megalithic structures came around the same time as the moon appeared?
I think the moon's appearance ended that. If it arrived at about 10,000 BCE, right, 12,000 years ago, you saw a sudden rise in sea levels as the glacial sheets melted around the world. As the sea levels rose, I think it destroyed that civilization. Most civilizations are coastal. This one was the same way. So it drowned a lot of things. Oddly, even Plato refers to Atlantis as having disappeared about 9,000 years before his time, which is about 2,500 years ago. So where does that put it? Right at that same time. Do I believe in Atlantis? I don't know, but it's interesting that Plato placed the death of Atlantis at right about that time.
Well, do you have any ideas on the Anunnaki, Zecharia Sitchin's work in a sense, and where that ties in?
And also on the Vedic texts of the Hindus as well, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata Codex, hard one to say. And they both seem to mention the fact that there was an alien species here. They were the overlords. They lived in palaces, which we think of as temples. They had a priesthood, which at that time literally served them, fed them, clothed them, bathed them. And we now have the same temples existing today with a priesthood, but it seems in some cases the gods may have vanished from them. And not to be blasphemous or anything. But yes, I absolutely think there was an overlord situation. Remember, the Earth wasn't highly populated way back then. It was far less people than it is today. So if there was a worldwide civilization, it was in small groups scattered around the planet, probably mostly in coastal areas. The Great Flood would have pretty well wiped out much of it. Also, I think the moon might have been moved here as a sort of Death Star to take control of the high ground, and whatever species was occupying the Earth at the time lost control at that time. The Vedic texts talk of an interstellar war with over 400 species. They talk about a battle that even took place on the moon. And I think it was Krishna who flew from the Earth in his Vimana to the moon to do battle there. And so the Vedic texts, the Sumerian, Anunnaki, texts from other civilizations around the world all seem to speak of the same thing.
Yeah, You mentioned as well previously about probes. About other countries having not, used their space program to take their own citizens to the moon, but they have launched their own probes. Like for example, China, India, they've put probes on the moon. Has any findings made their way back to the mainstream public of what those probes discovered?
Mostly it is hearsay and rumor that the Chinese found something on the moon. They actually put a probe on the moon, their little version of our rover on Mars. I don't believe the Indians landed anything on the moon. I think they placed something in orbit around the moon.
Maybe it was orbit around then, yeah.
Yeah, and again, photos from them can be doctored as they claim they have been with NASA. I've seen some evidence for airbrushing in NASA photos. I don't know why it's there, but I've tried to get Freedom of Information Act documents that are so redacted you might as well just not have bothered. They're 99% blacked out. But there's enough evidence from enough people. Yes, it's hearsay, but they testify to it. These are credible people from a lot of different walks of life, pilots, former officials at NASA, people who worked at NASA as techs. You get it from every source that something is going on with NASA, that they're hiding something.
So this is a full-scale world cover-up. This is not just an American cover-up. This is most countries are covering this up, would you say?
I think it's spotty. I think some countries, such as France and England, were actually trying to find information. I think England up until recently. Now they seem to have taken a back step. France certainly has been trying to, and other countries have tried to, but after they get involved in it and seem to learn a certain amount, then all of a sudden they stop disseminating the news to the public. Brazil is a case in point.
Do you think it's a great vantage point to be on the moon, to be able to look down then? To look down on Earth, basically? Because that's, we look up at it, don't we?
Any military expert will tell you that to occupy the high ground is the thing, the strategy, and the goal of almost any military force. If the moon is the high ground, and I certainly think it must be, then we are under their control. They can watch us day and night. We don't have the capability of launching an attack on the moon. That wouldn't take days to get there. Even missiles take days to travel. They could easily defend themselves in the intervening time. However, their technology might be something else entirely. It has to be. It has to be beyond ours.
There's lots to talk about here, isn't there? Because as we said at the beginning of this interview, your work, by looking at these, you connected other dots, and it goes out into all sorts of other branches. Do you think whoever potentially placed the moon there is still there now?
I think there's a very good chance. Enough sightings have been made, enough broadcasts were done by Apollo 11 that hinted at it. Other launchings have the same thing, that they were being followed, that something was there. They said, maybe it's your booster, and they said, no, we have that clearly in sight. It's not the booster, it's something else. Well, what else could it be that would follow them to the moon? I think there's a lot of evidence that someone is still there. I think ownership may have changed over the years. I'm not sure. We have ruins on the moon, apparently, and we apparently have some active mining bases on the far side of the moon, again, according to the sources I've talked to.
Well, yeah. There could well be. I suppose it's. What do you think is going to be the key here to sort of exposing some of this, or do you think it's a secret that's so very buried in a sense that it'll never come out of truly what may be on the moon or in the moon?
Well, now we get into the conspiracy theories idea. There's three basic ones for me. There's the idea that the government of Earth knows about it but can't do anything about it, so they're trying to protect us from panicking and our civilization collapsing, just as New World civilizations collapsed under the pressure of the European influence when they arrived. The second is the government does know about it and they're in collusion with it. They're getting something out of it, perhaps technology or something else. The third one is that the government isn't aware of it, or which I find extremely hard to believe. The United States government is very good at ferreting out information, and I'm pretty sure the Russians are as well.
We mentioned that they may be hostile. They may not have our best intentions. But why would they have allowed us to get to the pinnacle point of technology that we have now? Why have they given us the free will to do that? if they're hostile?
First of all, are you sure we have free will in that regard? Are you sure we're not being directed in some? There's enough evidence to show they've been around for millennia. Even Alexander the Great apparently was influenced by so-called flying silver shields that maddened his elephants and frightened his army when they tried to cross the Indus River into India. They did end up crossing it, but they were so demoralized, they quickly turned around and headed back home. So Alexander the Great's empire never spread further east. There's a lot of this sort of thing going on in history. So free will, I'm not so sure. Maybe directed is a better way to put it. I'm not sure whoever these people are, they have our sense of morality, or if they have a sense of morality at all. They may be amoral. We have the concept of human rights, that torture is wrong. Well, if they're abducting over 1 million people, as some argue in the United States, and that is a fairly valid claim, whether they're really abducted or not, over 1 million people claim to have been abducted, which is a major sociological phenomena in its own right and should be investigated, even if it's not aliens. But if they are being abducted, if they are being subjected to these things, it is against their will. Yes, the extraterrestrials wipe their memories, and sometimes they do come back under hypnosis. But the point is, if the torture has been done without their approval, then this is against human rights, and they don't seem to care.
There are others that talk about that this field has gone much more to the consciousness side, where basically there is a spiritual aspect to this, and it's not what we think it was. And even abductees like Travis Walton will now say, that actually it was a spiritual experience he had by entering that craft. That it was not as negative as the Paramount movie portrayed it to be at all. They actually saved his life.
Yes, maybe. He was also found naked and dehydrated a week later. The problem with that idea is, I think it's the Stockholm syndrome talking, that you begin to identify with your captors. I don't care what the reason is they abduct you. I don't care about any spiritual side effects down the road. The point is, if an alien craft spots you and takes you against your will and subjects you to whatever they subject you to against your will, that's against human morality and against human rights. Also, we have ample evidence of UFOs damaging property, perhaps killing and maiming different types of animals, cattle, horses, sheep. We have evidence for them damaging property in the sense of knocking over water towers, as in Australia. We have lots of evidence for this sort of thing. Could you cite me one example, one, out of all the thousands of instances of this, where the UFOs saved someone, like shining a light in the forest that led Hansel and Gretel out of the woods, or took someone, beamed them out of a burning house?
Sure.
They don't ever seem to have done a single thing that we could consider positive or good.
Sure. Well, yeah, it's almost like there is a free will aspect in this as well, as though, there is. In some of these experiences, there seems to be a free will aspect. I've had a few abductees on actually who talk about that, how very positive it was, the experience that they had. And I know you talk, as you've said there, about going hand in hand with your captors and best of friends and everything. But they would say quite opposite. But then there's people that have had these. Mind you, there was another guy that came on who I can't remember what the case was. Oh gosh, what was it? It was a kind of famous-ish UFO case, and in the end, the partners, it was a couple. The woman, actually communicated was communicating in the end with these beings, and it was kind of astounding what was coming through her. It was a lot of teaching information, it felt like, to her that was able to come through, spiritual teaching information. But again, I say I'm only reporting back to you what the people that I've bumped into and what they've told me.
Well, this sort of thing has been going on since the 40s and 50s. Mostly it started in the 50s. People being abducted, taken to Saturn or the planet Venus. Right, one's a 900 degrees surface temperature, the other one's a frozen ball of gas. And then they're told wonderful things. This was very common during the atomic era when people were afraid of the Cold War. First of all, is it true, or are these people just experiencing something and then thinking it's true. Secondly, perhaps they're being influenced unduly. If aliens can make you forget your memories, and in most abduction cases they are forgotten, if they can do your mind that way, you don't think they can't do it other ways as well? I would love it if they were our space brothers. I would love it if they come in the spirit of peace. I don't see them handing over their technology too freely to all of us. I don't see them curing cancer. I don't see them doing anything in a positive manner in the physical, hard reality evidence sense. I do see buildings being damaged. I do see people being abducted. I do see jets suddenly breaking to pieces and falling from the sky. And I don't see the UFO ships saving them. Could there be more than one species and some are benign and some are not? Yes, there could definitely be. I'm not saying there aren't. But the evidence I've accumulated shows a great deal of damage and harm to humans and human property. But I haven't seen, other than people saying they were positive, spiritual, and kind, I don't see them doing anything that's positive, spiritual, or kind.
Well, maybe the kindest thing is not making themselves known by landing on the White House floor, or but by not.
And yet they buzz their skies daily. I'm a field investigator for MUFON. We have thousands of cases in the United States alone every year, and that's just the United States.
That's just one. Yeah, absolutely. And this is a global. This is not just in the US. This is a global phenomenon. Absolutely. Well, I'm just saying, that we don't understand this phenomenon. We don't. As I've said to other people on previous interviews, what if the UFO phenomena is not even what we think it is, and it's something completely different? It's not extraterrestrials, it's something else. I don't know, I'm not putting words into it.
Well, anything not of this earth could be extraterrestrial. So even if they're from another dimension, that would be extraterrestrial as far as we're concerned.
I suppose that's where I'm pointing to, another dimension, other dimensions.
But also they could be from the future. That would explain a lot of the interference in our history, adjusting the timeline, whatever. Whether they're humans from the future, post-human civilization, or an alien civilization from the future, it is quite conceivable they could be from a future time.
Absolutely. I've heard that as well, and it's fascinating that side of it. Well, that's that was in the there was a UK incident, and I've never interviewed anyone about this yet. It was kind of like the Roswell, but without the crash. Rendlesham Forest, that was it. And when one of the staff sergeants, and I might be wrong here, but whoever it was touched the craft was actually conscious. The craft was conscious, and it told the person that it was just settling down here just to repair itself, because it had come in from the future, and it experienced some damage to itself, and it was just self-repairing, like you do.
Well, it fed him a lot of binary code, which he kept dreaming about, and finally, for a show that he was on, I think it was Ancient Aliens or UFO Encounters or something, they paid to have the binary code translated to see if it was just garbage or meaningful. It was a series of coordinates and dates, and one of the dates was 6,000 years in our future.
OMG, that sends shivers through my spine. Is that right? 6,000 years in the future. That's what
it was like 8,000 and something, I think it was AD. But so he now is firmly convinced, the sergeant, I think he was, that they're from the future.
Yeah. Wait.
Was he a sergeant? Do you happen to know? I can't remember.
I don't know. I'm going to get them on one day. I am. I don't know, but I know of that bit, and as you've just confirmed, that bit is what that they have said in previous interviews. That's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, what if some are from the future, some are from the present, some are from other dimensions? As you said before, though, it's not just one as we understand what one is. This is something much bigger than what is just one. Even the Roswell incident maybe wasn't what the others are, or maybe they are all connected. We just don't know, do we?
Actually, there's an even more incredible incident in New Mexico, and that was the Aztec incident. And there is more information on that than there is on Roswell. And I tend to go by the Aztec incident because it is just so compelling. I met the two people that researched it. They researched it over 30 years, and they have over 55,000 documents relating to the case. So it's absolutely ironclad as far as I'm concerned.
And who were they?
My mind's blanking right now, but I can get you the information if you like.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
I was lucky to remember the title, actually.
No.
The titles of all my books.
Don't worry. No, absolutely. No, I appreciate you. We'll speak off air about that. Definitely, that sounds interesting. Yeah, well, I'm surprised you said, or your evidence has pointed to the fact that when the moon came, the megalithic empire was sort of dampened or taken down or destroyed, and lots of lost civilizations at that time. That's incredible. So the Anunnaki could have been here. This other race came and then became the race in charge with intention.
Well, I go by the Vedic texts. They said it was a
Yeah.
great war, and they claimed that Earth was one of the things they were fighting over. Vedic texts claim there were over 400 distinct species. So yes, the evidence seems to show that. Also, whatever civilization existed at the time of the moon's theoretical arrival, and I do
Yes.
say theoretical, it ended. It ended rather abruptly and rather completely. There seems to have been a written language that was worldwide. We have some evidence for it on the world map stone, for instance. There's a lot of evidence that structures were built to last for a long, long time. For an alien race, this would be understandable. You have the platform at Baalbek, the temples of Baalbek. You have the Temple of the Mount platform. These were huge, and they were built long, long, long before any of the current temples or buildings were ever placed upon them.
Yeah, yeah. And there was also the talk as well that when Mars was a planet that was inhabitable potentially, in this Great War, as you mentioned, that was when Mars became uninhabitable potentially.
It could have been. We don't have enough evidence yet to support the idea one way or the other, because we have surface geological evidence, but we have no idea when the water phase of Mars came to an end. They estimate it might have been over 1 billion years ago, but it may have been a lot more recently. We just don't know yet.
Or others have said that a planet called Meldek crashed, smashed, collided, however the orbital collision happens, God knows, but yeah, collided with Mars, and that's what caused all the indents on the moon, the craters on the moon, and that's what caused Mars to have its atmosphere destroyed as well. There was some sort of catastrophe, basically.
Well, there is evidence of a vast crater on Mars, as if something very large impacted at one time. Most scientists think it happened a very, very, very long time ago, but again, we don't know for certain.
No, okay, so there's nothing that you found, that you found that ties into that with the hollow moon. What would you say is the implications of the hollow moon to the bigger picture of humanity? Then, in a sense of if we're not prepared to, if there is a bigger picture, shall we say?
I think there is. And by the way, I don't like having a negative outlook on this. And when I first got into the whole UFO thing, I wanted to meet our space brothers. I wanted to take a ride on a UFO. I thought of them as saviors of humanity. The evidence I'm finding just doesn't seem to point in that direction. Are they actively, aggressively our enemies? I'm not sure that's true either. But I'm not sure that whatever they're doing is for our benefit. And I think it might primarily be for theirs, and however it affects us just is how it affects us. The big picture, if the moon is hollow, if extraterrestrials are here, if they are in our skies as they seem to be, then I don't think it's a good picture for humanity. We're not being allowed to develop as we would like to. We're being directed or misdirected, and I'm not sure that's a good thing.
No, and
I'm hoping I'm wrong.
And I don't take, that this is your opinion, and it's very fascinating. It really is. I just put the opposing opinion in there just to see what, because there is that opinion as well. So just to sort of balance up both sides.
Right, and I'm hoping they're right and I'm wrong in this case. I really, really do hope that. Or at least I hope there are some good species out there as well as the not-so-nice species to counterbalance it.
I would aim more towards that. I'd like to aim more towards that, definitely. But like you say, the evidence does show, as it has in your case, what it shows, and you're just going with that, which is absolutely perfect. Okay, now where can people get hold of your books as well?
Well, it's easiest to get them in the UK on Amazon UK, or in America on Amazon.com. You can get the print and or the ebook version. Also on Smashwords for other ebook versions besides Kindle. You can get them or order them at most bookstores anywhere you want to. My latest book, Invader Moon, is out with Permuted Press and Simon & Schuster distribution, so it's available just about anywhere. Or you can get them at robshelsky.blogspot.com.
Excellent. Okay, well, we've been putting up your web store. Is that the best website to go to, is it, that you just mentioned there as well?
That's the one I use these days, yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, we've been putting your websites up along with your books throughout this interview as well. So, as you say, just go to Amazon to purchase those books, as we've barely touched any of the other books, really, and there is quite a number of books that you've done. I think you write quite a lot, don't you, in your days right now? There's 1,000 words a day, was it, someone said?
4,000 words a day.
4,000 words a day, wow. Okay.
On average.
That's pretty impressive. Well, look, Rob, I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I was having fun being here.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.